Okay, so we're going to talk about Rails forms today, and we're going to do a little bit of a review of like the concepts that we talked about yesterday as well. So REST, MVC, I feel like we kind of did that already, like going through some of the discussion questions. But let's do this anyway. So REST, can someone roughly explain what REST is and why is it useful?
I can. It's a convention for how to set up actions and HTTP requests to a web application. So you've got conventions like index, show, like these keywords that are kind of built into REST that combine HTTP verbs with specific actions on a web page or web server.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. That's a very nice explanation. A lot of times, I mentioned this yesterday as well, a lot of times you'll see APIs online that are that will tell you like they're REST APIs. They follow like RESTful conventions, which makes it a lot easier for you to be able to understand those APIs, and it kind of takes the guesswork out of creating your different routes. Awesome. What about MVC? What does MVC stand for?
Model View Controller.
Nice. All at once. Model View Controller. Yeah. Perfect. Model View Controller. This is also just a pattern that we use. That's especially very popular with Rails, and this is actually a very popular pattern that other frameworks use as well. Model View Controller, where the model is essentially like represents like the data of your application. The view is what you show to the user, what the end user sees, and then the controller is that in between. The view and the model never really talk to each other directly, right? The controller always sits in between to make that connection between the view and the model. So if we had a variable that where we're getting all of our students from the database, we would define this variable in our controller, and then our controller would like send this variable to our views. So we have our models, views, controllers. The controller is that in between the views and the models. Cool. What else did we have? MVC, REST. I'm forgetting one. What's the other thing we talked about yesterday? Someone remember?
We did some Rails G stuff.
Yeah, we'll do that today also. What's the other concept? Oh, CRUD. Well, yeah, CRUD, we kind of, you know, that kind of plays into what we're doing with our RESTful routes. But CRUD, create, read, update, delete, is a way, is like we're building CRUD applications that have the ability to do all of these things. And with the help of our RESTful routes, we are able to fulfill all of our CRUD actions. Cool. So let's build out a small application. We're not going to use the scaffold generator today. And we want to learn a little bit about forms. So we don't have an application right now. We just have a README. So we have to create our own application. Someone tell me how I create a new Rails application.
Rails new.
Rails new.
And
Perfect.
your, whatever the name of it.
Whatever the name is. We're gonna create a pizza application where we're gonna have lots of pizzas, and we can create new pizzas hopefully. So let's let this run through. So Rails new creates a whole bunch of files and folders for us. It creates this top level folder, and inside of it, can someone tell me like what are the like 3 main folders that we're going to be working in inside of a Rails application?
App, config, and database.
Yes, I heard all of them. App, config, and database. Exactly. App being like the main one. The app folder contains our models, views, and controllers. we're probably going to be changing we're only going to be touching these types of folders here. And then inside of our DB folder, we have things like our seeds, we have our migrations, we have our schema. So we're also going to be using that a lot. And then inside of our config folder, where did it go? Right here. We really only need to touch one file, which is our routes file right now. This is where we create all of our different routes. So let's jump into a folder here. And are there any questions here so far about like the review we did? And
just to, I mean, if we want to do this now, maybe bookmark it for later, but I don't quite understand why REST is called REST, like representational state transfer. I'm like, why is it called that? Like, I get what it's doing. Why is it called? What's representational? What's the state? And what is it transferring? I don't understand.
Right. No, that's a great question. So, so REST stands for representational state transfer. Awesome. Yeah, so does someone maybe have a guess why this might be called representational state transfer?
Well, it's just a high level representation of what the actions are when you're transferring data back and forth.
Yeah. Also, remember when we talked about yesterday, so if we go to GitHub or api.github.com/users, the URL that we're seeing here makes it possible for us to guess what the data might be, right? So the URL itself, or the route itself, is representational of the data that we're getting, or the state that like this. Let's see, the state. I would say like state could be kind of like interpreted as data here. So it's like what kind of data based on the URL and the HTTP verb are we transferring? So if we're making a GET request to /users, we are getting all of our users, right? If we're making a POST request to /users, we're creating a new user. Like, what's the data that we're transferring? It is like we're making it possible to create a single user. So the URLs along with the HTTP verbs represent this type of data. Like, you are able to kind of guess what that route is going to be doing based on the HTTP verb and the URL. Hope that kind of explains it, more or less. Any other questions here? All right, so let's go ahead and create an application, create some models, controllers, and so on. We already have our little Pizza Land application with all our files and folders. Now what we want to do is we want to create models, we want to create controllers, we want to create database migrations. Let's start with the models. How do I create a model in Rails?
Rails G model.
Rails G model. And I've already done this previously. Let's add the name for pizza. Can you all see this? So we got the name, we got cost. How come I don't how come I don't have to add my colon like string here?
So the default will be string.
It's assumed.
Yes. So whenever I don't add you know, what I want my attribute to be, so if it's a Boolean, integer, or whatever, it's always going to just default to a string. Cool. And then let's add another one. extra cheese. And we'll make this a Boolean because we haven't had that. Awesome.
True.
This is how we create a model. What else do we create here when, like, once I hit enter, what else am I going to be creating besides a model?
You need a pizza controller, right?
What's that?
A pizza controller for the model.
I will have to create a controller as well, correct? But this command right here that I'm going to be running, what else is it going to create?
We'll create the table and the model.
It's going to create the migration. Yeah, exactly. So the migration and the model. So let's hit enter here. I'm going to omit the tests. And we are getting an error. It's already used. Maybe because I called this Pizzaland. See if I have anything in here already. We'll just call this dish then. Okay, that didn't. Oh, did I not? Real. Oh,
Does it have to be capitalized?
space.
Or, no?
I think like my my terminal somehow is like off. So let me kill this one and create a new one. It just looks a little funky right now. Okay. It shouldn't matter if you capitalize it or not. Should give you the same result. Let's see if that works. Cool. So we have our migrations created right here, right? And our model. We can double check this inside of our models folder. We now have this dish class. And then in our database, we have our migration right here with the name, cost, size.
And in theory, you could also add in your relationships here too during the Rails G if you knew what they were at the time.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So we'll talk about associations. I believe we have a lecture on that tomorrow. No, on Friday. So we'll learn about the generators and how to create the associations between your different models via the generator. You can either do it in the generator or you can do it manually in your migrations. Cool. So someone mentioned that we also need a controller. So let's create a controller and we'll call this dishes. By the way, actually, before we do this, I want to show you something cool. So if you go into your Rails console, let me make this. One thing that you're noticing how we have certain things singular, certain things are plural, right? Sometimes it might, the singular and plural might not be exactly what you would expect them to be. But Rails actually has a way that we can figure out what the plural form of something would be. So if you type in, let's call this fish, and we say dot pluralize, we will get the plural form of that noun. There are a couple of quirks here. So if we say, let me see if I have this written down. So we can do like person, right? People. It's actually pretty sophisticated. Doesn't just give us persons. Woman, women, but I think this one is kind of funky. Human, human. So it isn't always perfect, right?
What about Pokemon?
Pokemon.
Yeah, Pokemon.
That's a good question. I always wanted this answered. Pokemons.
Oh no!
I'm pretty sure that. What's that?
Try cactus.
Cactus.
Also, I'm back. Sorry, my connection cut out in the middle of answering my own question. Oh, just weird.
Yeah.
Hey,
Just
one last one. Can you do octopus?
Okay. Oh,
Yay!
pretty. Yeah.
So if this is the case for
Huh?
cactus, and we know that it should be cacti, I think, right? Similar to octopi. Then if we do it English grammar correctly, it'll still be incorrect for this edge case. 'Cause
Right. So I think that there are ways of setting a certain plural form of something if Rails doesn't automatically isn't able to figure it out automatically. So if you have like an edge case like that, I believe I haven't done it myself, but I believe there's a way to set the singular and plural of a certain noun that we're using. Cool. All right, let's exit this, and we wanted to create a controller. So let's do a Rails G controller, and we'll make this dishes. And this should create our controller. Actually, I wanted to create this without our tests, so let's delete this again. And let's do this again with no test framework. Awesome. So we also get, oh, did the delete. So we also get our, remember we also get our views folder with a controller generator. So we have our controller and our views folder is automatically created for us as well. All right, so now that we have our models, we have our controller, we have our migrations. What else do I need to do in order to like get my application up and running? If I run this now on my Rails server, what error am I gonna get?
You need to do migrate before.
Exactly. That's exactly right. So Rails is nice enough. Wow, there's a button here that will run our migrations.
That's
I've never seen this
awesome.
before. That's incredible. I'm gonna try this. Okay, wow, that's blowing my mind right now. This is the first time I'm seeing that. Cool. Well, I guess you could just hit that button, but if you didn't have that button, we could do a Rails DB migrate, which will run our migrations. That's pretty awesome. So now that we have our migrations, whenever you migrate, I would recommend just kind of check out your, where's our schema? We don't have a schema. Let's run Rails DB migrate just in case. Maybe that button just kind of ran it in the background. There's our schema. Okay, so I guess the button doesn't give us our schema. So I would still recommend running Rails DB migrate. So always like check out your schema, make sure that your like all of your attributes are correct the way that you wanted them. You can always roll back and migrate again. And that's all looking good. Nice. All right, so
Why
is there a question?
add the datetime for creating an update?
So this is added automatically. So whenever, like, why is it using datetime is you mean, or why is that here?
Why they add it automatically? Why do I need it all the time?
Yeah, so I think there's probably a way that you can omit it, but usually with things that you're changing in a database, you want when an item has been created and when an item has been updated. That's just a very common thing to add in a database, and it's just Rails trying to be, helpful in a way. All right, so we have our models, we have our controllers, we have our database schema. What else do we need in order to make our application, if we want to go to /pizzas or /dishes, I guess. What else do we need?
Our routes.
Our routes, perfect. If you remember the graphic from yesterday, there are only so many files and folders that we touch upon, but we do need to add the routes, and that's in our config. I would also recommend using the Rails errors that are given to you for figuring out kind of what to do, right? So this is actually called error-driven development. And if you want to go to /dishes, what error are you getting? How can you fix it? So in our case, we need to add some to our routes. We can add our manual routes by adding like a get, / dishes, or we can reuse our resources macro, or what do we have, dishes. And then we can say, like, let's say we'll start with only our index action. That's all we care about right now. So this is going to create our index action for us.
I have a question about the resources. I've tried using that before and it didn't work, and so I had to do it the other way around, and that would work. I don't know exactly what this asks, but like, could you possibly go over what resources is doing really quickly?
Yeah. So if we did this manually, right, we do something like /dishes. And then we have to specify like where do we want to send this to, which controller and which action. And in this case, our controller is going to be our dish controller, or dishes, it should be plural. And then this is our index, so it would send us to our index action. Let's just make sure real quick. Okay, so this is actually working. So we can go ahead and define each one of our routes right here. Dishes / ID, right? Or instead of doing this, we can use the resource generator. So if we went to Rails /infra /routes, we can see all of the routes that we have available to us, right? So we have, we're going to ignore all of this down here. The only route that we created ourselves is this dishes index route right here. If we want to do this manually, we can absolutely do that. The resources macro will create these routes for us. So if I now comment out my manual route right here, and let's take this out for now, and I add this resources for dishes, we can see that all of these, like these 7 RESTful routes, so for index, create, new, update, and so on, they're automatically created for us without us having to do this manually. That's what the resources macro does. And then we can, on top of that, like specify, let's say, it's never really a good idea to have a bunch of routes kind of lingering around while you're not using them, right? So let's say we're starting with the index. We want to specify, hey, let's go ahead and start only with our index route, and let's ignore the rest of them. What that will give us is exactly what we had before. So this is the equivalent of this right here.
Thank you. That helped a lot.
No problem.
Quick question actually
Yeah.
about this too. I know that in several of the labs, it was like the get dishes to, and then the whatever that dishes index, and then as. I was wondering why you wouldn't just use resources across the board, why you would only, like, I mean, since resources give you the ability to do all of them, why would you need to include this specific routing as opposed to just do another resources?
Right. You know, there's no particular reason in our case right now why we wouldn't use the resource macro. There are reasons that you might want to manually create some routes, especially once we get to something like authentication. We're gonna, so like when you log in a user or like sign in a user, you're gonna probably have a page called something like /signin, right? You need to actually specify this page. There's no resource generator that you can use that will automatically name this route correctly for you. So that is when you have to do this manually. If you have, if you're building CRUD around a certain resource, so like for our dishes or pizzas or whatever we have, and you want the full CRUD, you want create, read, update, and delete, then there's no reason in not using the resource generator. You would just kind of use, you know, all of your routes automatically created for you. There's no point in like writing this out manually. But again, if you have something like a login or sign up, you might want to have a special route that will send the user to, let's make this, all right, so if we go to /login, obviously we don't have a login page, but if we were to go to /login, this is not, as login. Why is this not getting us anywhere? Not sure. Did I make a mistake here? Anybody see it? Yeah. So, but
We
the
need to have the view, the route. There's no view needed to see the login, or just be a white page.
yeah. So usually, like our first error would generally be like that. There's no route matches this. But if we already have the route, it should match this.
Gotcha.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, this should be, it should be right. Anyway, it's probably just a syntax thing. We'll be able to figure that out. But the point remains, you generally would use the resource generator for something where you want like full CRUD actions, and you would use like a special kind of custom route for like a login or a sign up.
So this is for like protection purposes with the specific Git or whatever for the login. Since you want to use that authenticity token, you would want to do it through this specific action as opposed to just giving it all CRUD.
So this is more for usability purposes. So if you have a user that goes to /login, they can see the login route being login, and it's not XYZ. Like that's not super helpful in knowing what that page is going to show, right? We're trying to be more explicit with we're trying to communicate with our URLs, like what's going to be behind that page once you go to this URL. So it's a little bit more on like a usability side. If that makes sense.
I think so. That makes a little bit more sense. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, another quick question.
Yeah.
How'd you get that pizza logo next to your local host?
Oh, I was working on a different application where I had that logo.
Cool.
This was actually a React application, and you can just replace. So this is what's called the favicon. You can replace that in Rails. I'm not sure. Oh, right here. So you have this favicon.ico in your public folder. Let me try a hard refresh. It's not. So it seems like we might not have one, or it's just not showing right. If you replace this with like your own logo, it should show up in this little corner up here. But yeah, this doesn't actually. It's kind of random that this happens to be a slice of pizza. It has nothing to do with the application we're building. Okay. So, and then one more thing that I mentioned earlier as well. Something that you generally want to be careful with is, yes, we can just say we want all of the CRUD actions if we know that's what we want. But if we know that like maybe we only want the index and maybe we only want the like show page, like protect your other routes. Don't create a whole bunch of routes that you're not going to use. I would say like kind of take it, obviously if you know you're going to need them all, have them all there for all I care, but try to narrow it down to the ones that you're actually going to use.
The routes and the index and the show, those are the actions, right? Are they order sensitive in the array? So index should become before show, and then show becomes before create, if you have just those three.
Well, since they don't really conflict, but I do think that this is another thing actually. Alec was asking about that yesterday. Order does matter in your routes. So say we have this is a great sidestep here. So I believe probably the order also matters in your array then, because the order of routes matters. So if we had dishes -id, this is for like a show, right? Single dish. And then we had dishes / new for the new page. Does someone know if we would be able to ever get to this new page? Dishes. Okay, so what's the error that we're getting here?
Don't have a method for this one.
Right, but how come it says the action show could not be found, even though we're going to /new? Isn't that weird?
Because it interpolates
it's reading
top to
that
bottom.
first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, because Rails is going to read your routes from top to bottom, right? So it's going to go to your first line right here, get dishes /:ID. That's supposed to go to our show, and it's going to say, oh yeah, okay, dishes /anything matches, right? Dishes /XYZ, that also matches my show. Because I'm using this dynamic part in my URL here with the :ID. The :ID is always a dynamic part. It could be anything. It could be an ID. It could be a string. It could be anything, right? We will always match this route first, and we will never be able to get to this new route. So what you have to do here is you have to flip your order. So if we move our new up above our dynamic route, we are able to actually get to this new route because, again, we're going from top to bottom. We're reading from top to bottom. We are matching the first one. So dishes /new is going to match, and it's going to show us our new page, hopefully, eventually.
I just wanted to ask a clarification question. So for these routes, these are just, we're setting these routes because they're what we want someone to be able to see, and that's what these are being set for?
Yeah, so yeah, go ahead.
Like working in the back end for stuff that you wouldn't want them to see, you don't need to add routes for them, or do you?
Right, yeah, if you, I mean, like, okay, do you have an example, maybe?
I'm trying to think with like the graphic that you showed us yesterday, where like for some of them, there's the view, and people are going to be able to see it, but then some other things like destroy, they're not going to be able to see it. Would you need to create a route for that, for like destroy, for example, or just only for things that someone can see?
That's a great question. Yes, so you do still need to create routes for that because whenever you hit that delete button or whenever you hit that submit of like creating a new item, you're still making a request to a certain route. So you, even though the user can't like see that as like an actual page, you do still need that route in order to be able to send that particular request to ID for like a delete request. And then inside of your controller, you need to make sure that you are dealing with that request somehow. You have like a destroy action or something like that. So great question. You definitely still need those like invisible routes also.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Does the static route, the show in this example, need to be ordered before the dynamic routes?
Yeah, so in this case, like the order matters, right? Because the dynamic part here is like kind of like a catch-all. It will automatically fire whenever we have a URL that's /dishes /something. So do you mean like in this like only part right here, or in general?
Potentially for just the examples there on line 4 and 5. So if you had dishes.new and you had a dishes.update, then both the new and the update would need to become before the ID, because the ID is going to kind of trump everything else.
Right. So you have to have your most specific routes toward the top. Okay, and your least specific ones toward the bottom. For like an update though, if we're updating something, that's going to go to our, that's going to be a patch, right? So this is, so once we are using a different HTTP verb, we're not going to conflict with our other HTTP verbs. It's the HTTP verb and the URL that have to match. All right, let's continue here. Let's see if we're running low on time. Maybe we'll extend this lecture a little bit to like the afternoon or something. But let's try to create something. I'm gonna actually bring all of my CRUD actions back here, all of my RESTful routes, and then let's add. I want to create at least one form to be able to like add a new dish. But first of all, let's put some seeds in our seed file. So we'll have a dish, salami, pizza.
How did you navigate to the seeds so quickly?
Oh, Command P will open up the file explorer. So if you type in seeds, it will send you that right there. Command P.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, let's see. I have a couple over here. Let me just copy this. And this is going to be a dish. And then we also had like extra cheese, right? So let's do that. True.
And it was a
True.
Boolean.
Cool. We'll just put extra cheese on all of them because we all love cheese. All right, let's seed this Rails DB seed to seed our database. And then let's go ahead and start our server again. And then if we wanted to go to like, and let's start with our index action. If we wanted to go to see all dishes, we would have to, let's close some of this. We'd have to jump, we already figured out the route. If you remember you could actually follow this. Let's see if I can find it right here. Okay, so thought I could bring that. No. All right, so let me bring this over real quick. That did not work. One second. I don't have that graphic anywhere else, so all right, that works. So we have our so we have our we're going to slash dishes, right, to get all of our dishes. First place Rails is going to look to figure out which controller action we need to send this to is our routes file. The routes file we just filled out. Now a next step is our controller. We need to add our controller action to catch this this like index of dishes. So let's add an index controller action here. And we know that we want to display, like we're going to want to display all of our dishes, right? So how do we pull all of the dishes out of our database?
Dishes.all.
Dish.all, yeah?
Yeah.
And let's assign this to a variable. Call this dishes, right? Whenever we are going to, so what I want to do with this dish.all is I want to display this on a page, right? I want to display this on my view page. If we want to send any kind of information to our views, so our views folder is right here. We have our dishes folder inside of that. Let's create a new file, index.html.erb. Inside of here, we want to like somehow show like all dishes, right? So we need some way to grab all of our dishes from our database. The way, remember that the view doesn't directly talk to our models or our database. It could hypothetically, but we generally want to avoid that. The way that we pass information from our controller to our view is via instance variables. So right here, we're using an instance variable, right? A local variable would not work. We send information to our views via instance variables. So inside of our index.html.erb, we can now use this @dishes variable. Obviously, we need an ERB tag here. in order to display all of our dishes on our page. Does someone know, can someone explain a little bit about like what ERB tags are? Why do we use them? Why are they helpful?
Letting the browser know what code to run and then what code to render and what type of code it is. Is it JavaScript, CSS, HTML, PHP, Rails, I guess in this case?
Yeah, so ERB, does someone actually know what ERB stands for?
Embedded Ruby.
Ruby.
Yes, exactly. Embedded Ruby. So essentially we're taking HTML and we're embedding Ruby into that HTML. So within our ERB files, we're always going to be writing HTML and or Ruby code within ERB tags. It is important that whenever you're writing Ruby code inside of an ERB file, you use ERB tags to run that code. Otherwise, if we were to just say @dishes, we're going to print this out as like actual HTML. So if we go back to our page, we're going to see like a string that is being printed out that's just @dishes, right? This isn't super helpful. This is not what we want. So if we want to write any kind of Ruby inside of this ERB file, we need to make sure that we add our ERB tags. So less than, greater than brackets, and then our % signs. And then inside of here, we can write any kind of Ruby that we want. Can someone tell me what the difference is between having our ERB tags look like this and with the equal sign?
The equal sign makes it so that it's actually shown on the page. Without it, it's just like would just be Ruby code that is not rendered.
That's not rendered. That's still being executed, but that's not rendered to the page. That's exactly right. So the equal sign tells our interpreter like, hey, go ahead and like actually print this to the page. So if we were to put our @dishes in here, we're gonna get some like really funky. We want to obviously print out like each dish at a time. So what we need to do here is we need to, if we have an array of dish hashes, we need to somehow iterate over those, right? So we can use like a each, and and like if you look at this, we're writing all of this in ERB tags, right? If we do not want to show our Ruby code that is being executed, we remove the equal sign. In this case, our iteration right here, we don't want to print that out to our page. The only thing that we want to print out to our page is the actual like name of the dish, probably, right? So this is an iteration. We need to make sure that we end that somewhere. I like to start with that. So right now, this is like valid code. If we refresh this, we won't see anything on the page, but this is a valid iteration.
What was that command that you just did to have the ERB things just automatically populated there?
Oh, I had copied them from earlier. I'm just pasting.
Oh, okay.
Enough, no magic. There are some extensions that you can get for like ERB tags. I haven't had a whole lot of luck, and I mean, some of them are fine, but the trade-off, and I haven't had the chance to like deep dive into that, is that if you have something earmarked as an ERB file, it will not autocomplete your HTML, and like the other way around. So there are things where you can like create snippets to create your like ERB tags based on a certain like command that you write. That's probably the easiest thing to do. Cool. Any other questions here?
Real quick one on commenting out ERB tags and HTML. The HTML has its own comment tags.
Yeah.
They don't seem to work on the ERB tags and vice versa. So I've been trying to figure out how you can comment out what and haven't found out the way.
Yeah, commenting out ERB tags is kind of a pain. So I believe you can just add a hash. Is it after the? I don't remember. I think it's before the % sign. Take that back. Hash before the % sign. I don't know if there's like a, no. after. Let's try that one more time. Okay, yeah, so after the first %sign, if you add a hash, it comments out that line of code. I'm sure that there are like extensions that will kind of make it easier, but again, like mixing ERB and HTML is kind of a pain sometimes. If someone finds like a cool extension, like please share it in the Slack channel so that other students can use it. All right, so let's bring this back in and see if our dish names are being printed. Awesome, looks great. Well, it looks okay. Let's actually go ahead and like wrap this in like a list. So I'm going to take an unordered list and wrap my iteration inside of that. And then for each item that I create, I want to print out a list item, which this will just create like an unordered list for me that will show everything a little bit more neatly. Indentation kind of left up to you a little bit if you want to like indent here or not. I don't think that there's a particular convention for that. So whichever one you prefer. All
Could
right,
you
we
also
have not,
use like a
yeah.
line break as well instead of like the list items?
Sure. If you wanted to, let's go back real quick. Do something like add like a break here or something like that. Yeah.
Cool.
I would recommend bring this back. I would recommend using something like an unordered list. And then if you wanted to use like styling to remove the bullet points or something like that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right, we have not gotten to the main part of our lecture, which is forms. Let's go ahead and stop here, and we'll continue this lecture in the afternoon. Does that sound okay to everyone?
Yeah, this has been like amazingly great, and it's cleared up
This is
so
super
much.
helpful.
So
Cool. Let's make these lectures just all day long. All right, let me stop recording real quick.